Okay, welcome back to Enjoy Parenting, the place where we explore the beautiful value of being a parent and the art of getting the most joy out of that. That was not meant to be a pun, but it is a pretty good one because I'm joined today. I've got a guest, Luke Travers. Luke Travers worked with me in the past at Van Damme Academy. He taught me everything I needed to know about appreciating art. And I loved it so much that I actually took over the program after he left the school to do other work. So he is, as far as I'm concerned, the person that taught me how to love art, from the ground up. He has a beautiful approach to it. And what we're hoping to talk about today is the value that art can have in a child's life, and then also maybe even explore some artworks around the topic of parenting. So, Luke, can you tell us a bit more about yourself so that the audience can know, what you do and what sorts of things you have to offer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's great to see you, Kyle,
Yeah.
and great to be here. I am not a parent myself. First and foremost, I'm not a parent. I do have a 3-year-old cat, which I don't know how close that is. The children in my life have been my niece, my sister's child, who's 13 now, and the students. And over the years, it's been lots of classroom in person and online, and lots of tours, and from 5 years old, art tours, art museum tours from 5 years old up through all ages. And I currently teach junior high and high school students, and also I teach art appreciation, an elementary art appreciation class where we combine from 6 years old to 11 years old. So I have a lot of friends who are parents, and I've observed how they're using art with their children, or sharing art with their children has brought them joy in parenting. And I've been a surrogate parent through teaching to get a sense of the kind of value that I think can be gained as a parent by sharing art with your child.
Yeah, I've always found that I'm still a relatively new parent myself, and I've definitely been humbled since becoming a real parent. Since I'm not just on the sidelines but in the game. But I also find that many years as a teacher, you get a wide range of experience with many different kinds of kids. When you have your own child, there's a depth but not a breadth of experience. So you've got your approach of working with art and helping people to develop an appreciation for. Can you give like a summary on 1 foot of how that works, or what is the kind of basic approach that you are promoting with art?
Reading. So the summary in 1 foot is reading the artwork like a story, and personally connecting or empathizing with the characters within. And if you like, I'll give a quick story that I think helps illustrate how this really resonates with children. Because this is a friend, actually a mutual friend of ours, who I observed doing a bedtime ritual. And I remember you guys talk like bedtime rituals, and it's a bedtime ritual that I think all parents do, which is like bedtime stories. And at the time, this friend was with his 2-year-old daughter, and I got to be in the room and participate in the bedtime story. And he had a picture book out, and he was reading, and she was really into it. But I wasn't quite seeing what he was reading. I thought he was just reading from the book. And then I caught a glimpse of what he was reading, and what he was saying was not matching the words that were in the book.
Yeah. He was just inventing it himself.
He was inventing himself and describing the pictures. And his daughter was really into it and was looking at the book very closely to see what he was describing. And so I asked him afterwards, why were you doing that? And he said, one thing he said was, well, because often what's written in the book, the text in the book does not match with the images. But that, for me, what really resonated was seeing in action something that I think is the basis for art appreciation for me from 4 years old to 84 years old. And that is putting words to the images that you're looking at.
Yeah.
And I think with children, it's something that you instinctively, naturally, and really desire to do. You're looking out at the world, and as you're learning language, you're wanting to know what to say when you see the world. And so that little experience where he's reading to his daughter and she's wrapped by his description of these images, I think captures for me why children especially have really gravitated to this approach that I use for everybody. And it's something that kind of this approach of reading an artwork, it's kind of taken away at some point in a child's education, maybe 5th, 6th, 7th grade, where art becomes more about crafts and style and art history rather than reading.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's when you practice this approach enough, you read artwork and then you just read the life around you, like everything, the people that you see around you, your wife across the table, your children, you can articulate their body language, their facial expression, the situation that they're in. This approach of art appreciation that you have, it's kind of training you how to articulate stuff that's automatic or instinctual. And yeah, a lot of parents know just how valuable it is to give kids that ability, to give them the ability to express themselves, to be able to describe situations really clearly. And so your approach for art appreciation, it's not just about the art, it's about human experience and putting words to human experience. So it's not like you're not sitting down with a bunch of 4-year-olds and say, all right, this is Van Gogh. Guess what part of his body he cut out? But it's not historical.
Yeah.
It's you're looking at the artwork as a work of art, not as a work of history. Yeah. So can you walk us through this then? Like, let's suppose that you've got a young child, I don't know, primary school, elementary school, and it's your first class with them. Walk us through what that looks like. Because that might be, we can put ourselves in the shoes of that little kid and you can say how you teach them this approach.
Yeah. And Kyle, you might recognize some of this because from our conversations together, I think you do some similar things.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and I'll be curious to see what resonates with you in this description. So for an elementary student, first day, it'll probably look a lot like the 2nd and the 17th day. It's is we get an artwork out. Oh no, actually we don't get an artwork out yet. What I do is I share a personal story from my childhood first. I tell them a little bit about the time where I don't know, there were some bees around and I got really scared because I'd been stung by a bee before in my hand while I was on a sailboat. Like on a sailboat, I got stung by a bee. And so then when I was back on land, like later on, there were more bees and I got really scared. I tell them that story. And and that's it. I just tell them the story. And they're fascinated because I think just from observation, children love to hear what it was like for you to be a child.
Yeah, we were talking about that on just the last episode, just how powerful it can be to share with the child your own history and your own experiences as a way of making their experiences objective. It's not something that's inside them anymore. They can look at human experiences because someone's telling them a story. But anyway, so you start with your own personal anecdote, and then the next step is?
And then I show them an artwork. I mean, like completely out of the blue. I said, okay, hard transition. Okay, thank you for listening to my story. Now let's turn to some art. Yeah. And the first thing I have them do when we look at an artwork is immediately to glance at it and to give it their own title. What would you call this painting? Yeah. And so they look at it real quick, come up with their first words, and then afterwards we start reading it together. Now, for elementary children, my approach is I have a set of questions that we're going to ask each other and figure out what is happening in the story of this artwork. And I set up the slideshow so that each of the questions corresponds with a different part. And the questions are meant for us to look more closely, to look for details and clues as to what's going on in the story, or support some conclusions we have. Like if this character looks sad, what do we see about them? Can we find 4 clues that make us see them look sad? And then we try to bring it to life a little bit more. Imagine, what kind of movement there is going on, implied movement, or what could this character be saying?
Yeah.
And then as we go through and we figure out what's going on and kind of bring it to life, then we summarize what is happening in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, I ask them a question about how they might relate to what the character in that story is going through.
Yeah.
And guess what? The thing that character is going through is a thing that is something that I had told them about already in that first story I shared.
Yeah.
So then if they're not coming up with a quick example of a time that they were scared by some creatures that they weren't familiar with, then I might ask them, do you know of somebody else that has a time like that? And they'll say, oh, Mr. Travers, that time with the bees.
Yeah.
And that will spark. But that act of integrating my moment and maybe their moment with the artwork makes that the abstract meaning of the artwork real. And then we have something to share with each other. This kind of artwork that captures a similar kind of experience between us and the other students.
Yeah. So there's a lot that's happening in that whole process. And, you and I, we taught together about a decade ago, and then I think we've been proceeding along similar lines. Like, as you were describing these 5 phases, like, I've got all 5 of those phases. They've got special names in my classes. Cool. But it's really important to understand just what the child is doing with all of that, that they are practicing one really rigorous thought, that if they have some conclusion, they got to tie it to observations that they can point to. So they're sad. Well, how do you know that they're sad? Yeah. Or it goes the other way around. Like, they make some observations, and then all of a sudden, oh, I figured it out. I put the clues together. So it teaches them a very healthy way of thought, where their conclusions are connected to particular pieces of evidence and vice versa. And then just when you go through this whole process and you now have this powerful human experience, because what good art isn't about a powerful human experience? A powerful human experience is now an objective thing for them. It's this image that they can hold with them. I always imagine each artwork that you show a child as being like a magic talisman that will help them in life in the future. That I've got this talisman for when I'm afraid. I've got this one for when I'm deeply in love, and so on. And so it's not just about understanding hoity-toity paintings in a stuffy museum. It's getting them ready for life. It's giving them the depth of what the humanities have to offer in a way that's way more accessible than you would expect for little kids. So yeah, I love it. I now have a program at the school where I work with kids from 2nd grade through 8th grade. And when they have, seen me once a week, and they've got a new painting every week, and they've been practicing all of these skills, it's crazy. I can put, a sophisticated painting by Ilya Repin in front of these 8th graders, and spontaneously talking with each other, they'll figure out everything that's going on with the plot of the painting. They'll understand the theme and connect it to different ideas. And not only that, when you go out of the museum, all these skills are really useful for the kids, because it means that they can read, like I said before, facial language and body, facial expressions and body language really easily. It means that they're used to looking at normal human experiences and finding the depth and the value in them. Now, we've been describing this method, and it will probably be easier for our viewers to understand if we have a real example.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, I know that you are working on a new book. I remember helping to edit your first book so many years ago, and this is your second book. What's it called? What can people find in it?
So the first book was called Touching the Art, and that was a how-to book. So here's the method laid out, and you can sit down with it and do some exercises, go through the process yourself to try to become more familiar with it. It was kind of, after you've been on one of my tours, here's the method behind it. This book I'm writing now, called Stories in Paint, is 50 artworks that are there ready for you to consume.
Oh,
with
wow. Okay.
a few guiding questions, and then my reading. So I was just thinking about it today. I guess it would be like the reverse of a novel that's illustrated or a short story book that's illustrated. If you have a short story book and then somebody comes along and illustrates a short story book, this is the reverse. You've got the illustrations, and I'm coming along providing like my version of the stories, my readings of the artworks.
Yeah.
But it's inviting you also to read the artwork with in a few ways, with a set of guiding questions, like the kinds of questions that we just went over with, how I present to the elementary children. And also, I'm building QR codes into each artwork so that you get like a zoomable image. And you get also like the audio version so that you don't have to read back and forth and look. You could just be looking at the artwork while you listen to the questions and the reading.
Yeah.
So it's meant to be a book that it's big coffee table book. It's meant to be one that you're not having a class on how to cook, but you're enjoying 50 meals. And over that process, you're kind of assimilating a little bit of how to cook. But the goal is to enjoy the meals and to enjoy them together. Because you're going to spread that square 11 by 11 book out on the table, and you're going to have friends, your children maybe with you, your husband or your wife, they're sitting beside you and reading like you and I do in a classroom, reading the artwork together and piecing it together. So that's the book.
This is a brilliant product because it's almost like Luke Travers is curating the world. Because it's you have you are the master of your method, and you've been giving tours forever, and you know just how to hold people's hands through an artwork and get them to just help themselves find the meaning of it. And not only do you get the guidance of Luke, you also get the his selection. Like you've curated. So if I were to go to, and I'm, probably your biggest devotee. If I were to go to a museum, I'd have to drive there. I'd have to pay for all the tickets. I'd have to go through a whole bunch of garbage before I found one that I really related to. But this is right in your house. And I'm sorry, I know I sound like an infomercial that's just promoting this, but this is genuine where I think that it's such a clever product. And I think that people are going to like it a lot. Okay, so let's go to an artwork. You said that you had an artwork on parenting, and that we can try to use your method together so that people can see, one, how valuable art can be to a parent, and then also figure out how this method can be a useful thing and a fun thing to do with your kids.
Are you ready to make a decision? I'll give you a choice of two categories, and you can decide which one. Do you want one where the parenting is implicit or the parenting is explicit?
Let's go with, I'll go with implicit. Yeah, that's fine.
And I think this is one that you've not seen before.
Oh, okay.
And that will be even better if you're kind of going through an artwork for the first time. So let me zoom in and I'll share my screen, and let me know when you can see it. So sharing my screen right now. And do you see it?
Okay, I see it now. Yeah. All right. So my mind is zipping, but I want to be a good example of your method. So we start off with a title, right?
Yeah.
A pretty bowl of butterflies.
Whoa, I love it. Pretty bowl of butterflies. That's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, and then we can go from there. I love that because there's just it's not only for the poetic alliteration, but there's some questions like, what are these butterflies doing on a pretty bowl? And so here's my first question. That's the same question I ask at the beginning of each artwork: is what's going on in this moment? What do you see going on in this scene?
Okay, so she's holding a bowl, and there's butterflies that are gathered around it, and she's looking down into that bowl. She's got kind of a blank expression. Well, that's not quite the right word, but there's not a big expression on her face. She just seems very focused and intent on watching what's happening in that bowl. It's also really interesting to me the way that her fingers are holding it. Right. It's kind of like it's firm but delicate, the way that she's holding on to it. Like she's not holding it casually. She's not gripping it, white knuckling it, or worried. She's not like freaked out about these bugs. Her hands are very, very careful and firm. So I don't know. Was that
That's great.
okay.
I'm loving all the description that you're doing, and I'm going to ask the questions as they're laid out in the book because this is one of the artworks in the book.
Oh, okay, great.
And so it's these are kind of the questions that you kind of hinted at them, but imagine you're listening to the audio version of the book, and I'm kind of going through these, and then I'll share my reading that's in the book. So, what movement do you see going on around her, and what is not moving?
Okay, so the butterflies are clearly moving, like they're flitting down and flitting up, and she is really not moving. She's a lot of what I was describing earlier. It's a sense of stillness.
Yeah.
That she could stay in that position for a while without moving. And even some things in like the way that her hair is all done up, that kind of fits into the that she's all business.
I'm gonna make a note of that. Okay.
Yeah.
How about this question? Why did the butterflies and bees, why are they gathered around this bowl?
Well, I'm guessing that there's something like my first thought is that there must be some sort of like sweet nectar in it. And actually, now that you zoomed in, it does look like there's a flat level of liquid there. So maybe there's some sort of sugar water that's attracted them. I don't know that much about butterflies. Maybe they want vinegar for all I know. But yeah, she's probably put this concoction together to attract the butterflies. It's not like she sat down to a bowl of sugar water and then these butterflies ruined her day.
Okay. Yeah, obviously not. Yeah. How about this? Is this girl someone who seems like she lives among wildlife?
No, not really. I mean, she's got the very beautiful and ornate band around her dress, and the frills on it. And so she looks more like she was used to fancy parlors than being out and about in nature.
All right. And what is the attitude of the girl towards the insects?
It's like she's studying them. She's trying to see what they do next. She's just observing their behavior really, really closely.
Okay. And one more question. Do you know anyone who would be so engrossed by observation of nature like she is?
Yeah, most kids will fit this description. I can easily picture my own Isaac doing this. I'm trying to think of the last time that I saw him so focused like that. Like, I'm sure that it's one of those things where it happens so often that you don't file the memories away.
Yeah.
But no, especially for things in nature, when he does see, critters or unusual plants or something like that, he'll get really focused and intent like that. And then also Legos do that for him. He's finally getting the manual dexterity to put them exactly where he wants to. So
yeah,
he'll get pretty focused about that stuff.
All right. Are you ready for my reading?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Here goes. A young girl sits very still. She holds a golden bowl filled with a golden liquid. Butterflies flutter around, then pause to sit on the bowl's edge. Bees buzz over, and in this insect commotion, the girl sits stark still, shoulders drawn forward, both hands spread to hold the bowl carefully. Her chin is a mere inches over the bowl, and she stares down with serene curiosity and a slight, ever so slight smile. What is she thinking as she looks on? Definitely not gross or scary, but she's also not being overly analytical. The insects seem to almost be new pets. It reminds me of my neighbor's child who first met my kitten, George, the aforementioned George. He didn't pet her like his friend aggressively did. He just looked at her and held out his hand, letting the kitten come to him. There's that kind of caring fascination in the girl's eyes and in her fingers. She will hold that bowl still for her new companions, and they will come flutter to her like the animals drawn to Dickon in the secret garden. But she is not a child of the wild like Dickon. She wears a dress, um, and an embroidered with gold and an intricately patterned gilded belt. She looks like a princess on a playdate. Now, the title of this painting is The Honey of Hymettus. That's ringing a bell for you?
No, but I'm just delighted that there's actually probably a backstory to this. I was just looking at this as a plain image, but it sounds like there's some mythology here.
A little bit, not much.
Okay.
Hymettus was reputed in ancient Greece. So Hymettus is a mountain chain right near Athens. And Hymettus was reputed in ancient Greece as a place of cultivating honey.
Okay.
That's it for the backstory.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sometimes artworks have extended backstories, sometimes they don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can imagine the aroma of the honey filling her nostrils and adding even more warmth to the scene. As I think about how I'd personally connect to the moment, I can think back to my childhood, and I think I would have been scared of encountering the insects. I still remember being stung on the bee by a bee on the palm of my hand when I was 7 or 8. I would have been fascinated by her calm kindness. As an adult, I really like to think about this child as a student of mine now. I want to help foster this kind of open, tender fascination with the world. As she holds the bowl, I can imagine her thinking to herself and looking at these bees and these butterflies. I see you there drinking. I see you there fluttering, my little friends.
Well, Luke, that's beautiful. So I'm hoping that our viewers right now can see just how much depth you can experience with the painting, and hopefully, you'll want to have some fun with your kids too, because you can use this book to very easily go through these activities. There's one thing that I want to say about this painting is it's a great example of what you might hope for as a parent, that you want to have moments where your child is really enwrapped with something. You want to have moments where they are just zeroed in, totally focused on this new experience. And I also really like the contrast that you were pointing out earlier, that she looks like she's a city folk and she's getting in touch with some nature. And so this painting, now that I've spent some time with it, it's going to stick in my head as something that I can pursue, something that I would hope for. I want to have Isaac have moments like this in his life. And, if this painting can be a little talisman like that for me, it can concretize some very sophisticated ideas about parenting. Imagine how valuable it's going to be for a child to spend a lot of time with art growing up and to just have a whole collection of these talismans that they take into adulthood. Now, we've got a few super chat questions that I want to get to. Mm-hmm. We're running out of time here, but before I get to the super chat, is there a link that you want to send people to for people that want to find the book?
Yes, there is. It might be easiest if you want to find the book Stories in Paint. There's a Kickstarter going on right now to raise money where you can pre-order the book. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to go to kickstarter.com and just simply search for Stories in Paint, Luke Travers, you should be able to find it. You should be able to find it. So that kickstarter.com, Stories in Paint, Luke Travers.
Great. Stories in Paint on Kickstarter. We all know how Google works. I'm sure folks can find it from there. So a couple questions that came in that I wanted to get you to weigh in on. This comes from Duncan. Is it more important to teach kids to appreciate and read art than to do art, like to paint or draw? Or are they equally important?
I'd say both. So one activity that I do have children do as homework, there's an extension activity, if they're older, then I'd have them write something. If they're younger, then I might have them draw. So what I might do with the painting we just did is say, okay, would you draw a time when you were fascinated by something kind of wild out in nature? Mm-hmm. And then they tell me about the time that they saw the spider and they draw themselves looking at a spider. So I see the creating art part as an extension of it, where it's another form of role playing with reality. You get to see somebody else's story. Now create your story that this is inspired by.
Yeah. Yeah, I can echo that from my own experience teaching art appreciation, that it's not like one's required for the other, or that a child is deficient for not having one, but it's like there's no wrong answers. It can all be good, and it doesn't even have to be visual arts too. The work they do with art appreciation of visual arts can embellish, writing or singing or acting. So let's see, another question that we have here. What are the best books and artworks that resonate with children aged 6 through 10? It's a pretty big question. I'm thinking that they're asking from for a literature curriculum, and we could spend a long time coming up with that list.
So if it's more towards the visual arts, the one thing that comes to mind immediately is any book with Norman Rockwell paintings.
Yeah.
I bet you concur with that. So yeah, Norman Rockwell art there. It's densely story driven, and there are lots of clues to figuring out, and they're all very child friendly, often featuring children. So that would be my go-to artist. Finding a book, and they're pretty easy to find, of Norman Rockwell paintings, and sitting down and reading those.
Yeah. Norman Rockwell is the easiest entry for lower elementary students. Other artists that could be fun after you've spent some time with Norman Rockwell. Bouguereau is really William Adolphe Bouguereau. And was that a Bouguereau painting that we were just looking at? Or
no, it wasn't. I don't even remember the name of the artist. But I think the fact I don't remember is indicative of the value of the approach that we're taking. But I will say this very quickly about the painting. It's in the Philadelphia Museum of Art and currently on view. And all 50 of the artworks are taken from American art museums. And that's part of how they're all gathered together, so that a lot of what I've been doing is trying to make sure that these artworks are on view currently, though sometimes, they get taken off of view. But it's so much fun to go see the artwork in person. So that's one effort that I've tried to make, that you can see these in person after you spend time with them.
Yeah. And then another part of the question was best books for children in that age range. It might be easier to point them to a resource that's Van Damme Academy's website does have some lists that they can look at there. I don't know if you have your own lists online anywhere for any of the things that you do.
So I guess, on my site, literature@ourhouse.com, I've got book lists that we do with the upper elementary. And then also, we just started a lower elementary class with Tonya Fingerhut. Yeah,
oh, wonderful.
She's teaching the lower elementary. So we've got the book list for those at literature@ourhouse.com.
Great. Well, we're a little bit past our time, but I want to thank you for coming on here. And I'm going to sound like a Luke Travers shill here, but this book, I teach art appreciation more than anything else. It's an enormous part of my career, actually. And I wish I had thought up this idea that Luke has. So it sounds like a wonderful resource for yourself or to share with your kids. So please check it out, Stories in Paint, and you can find it on Kickstarter. Thanks for coming on to Enjoy Parenting, Luke.
Thank you, Kyle.
Bye.